Terrific. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be with you this evening. It's dementia. Let's take dementia out of the closet. The topic dementia is not a topic for lively dinner conversation. No one at cocktail parties with a glass of champagne in their hands will bring up the topic. It's verboten, it's forbidden. There was a time when cancer, the word cancer, was also off limits. It was perhaps euphemistically called the C word. People were so terrified of the subject that they acted as if discussing it might make them vulnerable. Certainly a person with this condition must be ashamed or embarrassed. Surely one would not discuss it in public. Eventually, organizations were formed and the conversation was brought forward. Stars of television and movies and film, through their interviews and books, made it possible for the world to become accustomed to this very high probability that one of the many forms of cancer could affect each of us in our lifetime. These changes opened up the public perception, their awareness of treatments, advancements, and in many cases, cures. When I was young, children with Down syndrome were placed into institutions and were never spoken about in polite society again. How humiliating it must be that a defective chromosome or gene could produce a human being with a learning disorder or speech or physical or cognition problems. Surely any child who's not perfect must be dismissed entirely. Today, we not only have opened up the conversation about these amazing individuals, but they are encouraged to lead full lives, and they're embraced not only by their families and friends, but by society as a whole. Special schools are created to accommodate all kinds of disabilities. Volunteers to wonderful organizations befriend them, and their world is now open for opportunities in employment. Many are so capable they're even on television or in movies. Dementia is the ugly duckling of conditions. The word itself creates fear. I was with somebody a couple days ago who was sharing her fears with me, and when she saw that my website had the word dementia in it, she felt a chill go down her back. My goal is to change that perception for the families who are giving the care specifically, and for the public at large. The hardest part for each of us is coming to the understanding that the cognitive decline of our loved one is not likely to improve or even to remain status quo. Often, depending on its cause, slowly but surely, it may become more severe and more difficult to manage. There are certainly exceptions, some situations, but those exceptions are rare. There are more than 25 different diseases that cause an assault on the pathways of the brain. Some people say there are as many as 100. There are just as many explanations as to why a decline in cognition occurs. In my youth, the word was senility, or hardening of the arteries. That was what was bantered about. Family members with this condition were often put into institutions or hidden from others. The fact is that dementia is unfortunately increasing at an incredibly fast rate worldwide. The World Health Organization reports that there are more than 55 million people who are dementia sufferers on the planet. In 8 years, they project this number will increase to 78 million sufferers. That means an additional 23 million people will be added to the 55 million people who we already know are patients at present. Thanks to medical discoveries, the lifespan continues to increase. People are living much longer now. But the problem with that, of course, can be that more and more people will have dementia. The problem is that we need to look at a bigger picture than just the patient. If we estimate that every patient has a partner or a spouse, a brother, a sister, children, grandchildren, friends, I don't think it would be unreasonable to say that for every person who has learning, cognition decline, that there's probably at least another 5 people in their life who are also affected by the severity of their loved one's condition. So if we do some multiplication, we find that now we've gone from, at this moment in time, we're looking at 330 million people who are affected and impacted by dementia in their family. In the next 8 years, which I gave you the second figure, that number will go up to 470 million people. Another 20 years from now, we could see more than 1 billion, with a B, people affected by a loved one in their family or themselves having dementia. And this is a very, very serious situation. We owe it to ourselves and to our families and people that we don't even know to open up the understanding of this condition. By doing so, we will have communities, churches, synagogues, schools, governments, all paying more attention with more sensitivity and a deeper understanding that will result in the funding for many important things. There will be more services offered to those who are financially unable to withstand the burden of the care required. There will be more research and there will be more cures for different forms of dementia. Most of us are well aware, all too aware, that caring for a loved one with cognitive decline can be a very expensive ordeal. Hiring of care aides, sometimes 24 hours, as I had with my husband, medical equipment, medicines, food supplements, prescriptions, paying others to give us a break so that we can actually go out for a walk and take a deep breath. This is a very expensive journey indeed. First and foremost, it's critical that we ourselves, everybody who's watching this with me today, that we are not embarrassed or ashamed because someone that we love has dementia. We ourselves need to remember that when this special person was at their prime, that is the person that we want to always remember. That is the person who made choices in their life that made them special, unique, loving, deserving of respect. That is the person that matters, not the fact that this condition has made it harder for them to remember their past or their relationships. So we need to focus on that as well. And by doing that, I think that we have a lot more pride. So when that person was in control of their lives, that's the person that we want to remember, and the accomplishments and the relationships that they nurtured during those productive and healthy years. Those are the essence of who they are. This is the totality of their being, not the person who has been affected by memory decline, cognitive decline. It's not a punishment that somehow we deserved or our loved one deserved. It's simply a condition like any other disease, but however, it is indeed punishing to us as caregivers, to the families, to the patient, but not due to anything that was ever within their control or ours. Part of the problem is the word itself, dementia. People fear the word more and more, and its implications. Images of a person who's demented conjure up visions of mental institutions, individuals medicated into oblivion. This is an image which we need to change both in our own minds and in the minds of others and the public. Today's medicines are so wonderful, so sophisticated, that when properly prescribed and when properly administered, that's very important, the quality of the patient's life can really be wonderfully improved. as is, by extension, the life of those who are caring for them and who care about them. In essence, it may sound a little outrageous, but I think we have to stand proud that we support the people that we love, that we don't run away, that they deserve our support because that's how special they were and are. In doing so, we set an example for others in the future. One day, we just may need them to stand proud for us. We now live in an age of communicating, when there is an opportunity to learn about diseases and treatments and cures, to join others who have similar experiences. This is a blessing for us all, and only if we take advantage of it. There is support to be had, even if you live in the tiniest town with minimal resources. As long as you have Wi-Fi and a computer or a laptop or a tablet or a phone, you can actually be part of a supporting community. And you can get answers and you can discuss things that are concerning you when caring for a loved one. We're really in a whole new age, and I don't know how many people, who are out there take advantage of it, but it really is quite special. As my husband's cognitive decline increased, I felt myself more and more alone. The invitations to homes of friends began to come in more slowly. The phone rang less. I was forever trying to make my husband's behavior seem less worrisome for those with whom we came in contact. I no longer even had the energy to repeat to others just how exhausting caring for my once dynamic husband had actually become. With only a few friends who had the sensitivity and time to allow me to vent my real feelings, I began writing about those experiences and those emotions. I'm actually suggesting this to any of you who find yourself unable to process the very difficult moments that you are experiencing. By beginning to write down specific episodes in the caregiving journey, I was then able, because I had my computer and I put my stories and my thoughts onto the computer and used it as my notebook, I was able then to take what I had written and send it in emails to family members who wanted to know what was happening. The truth is that when we are taking care of someone that we love, who has dementia or Alzheimer's or Lewy bodies or frontal lobal dementia, there are so many varieties to this condition that when we take care of someone with those conditions, we are really, really tired. It's very hard for us to communicate to others when we're in the midst of the caregiving experience just how hard it is. So I found that by writing it into my notebook, I called it my diary, and sending it on to family who actually were interested and cared, or friends, they came to understand the whole experience that I was having with my husband, and they became very supportive. So I think this is message number one, and that is that if you don't share with other people what you're experiencing, it's not quite fair to expect them to be supportive, because they may not even understand what kind of support you need. Bottom line, most of us, what we really want is someone to give us a break, come visit our loved one, play cards with them, watch television with them, give us a break so we can go out and get a fresh air and some walk, do a little shopping, something like that. But I find that a lot of people complain that they don't have any support from friends or family, that everybody walked away. And I often wonder whether or not they have been able to share in a constructive way what they're going through. By doing it in writing, through an email and forwarding the letter, the person has a chance to digest what you're saying. They don't have to give you just the perfect response the very second they hear it. The truth is, they automatically want to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you're going through this." And the truth of the matter is, none of us actually want anybody to feel sorry for us. life happens to everybody, and we all have responsibilities, and we all have our ups and downs and trials. We don't want people to feel sorry for us, but we would love it if they would help us and support us. But we do need to let them know what that means. If we do not speak openly about dementia and how it impacts on ourselves, our families, our health, the quality of our lives, while being committed to helping someone who needs attention and care, how can we expect others to help us and be supportive? If we don't, to relieve us, even in small amounts or short, from this emotionally overwhelming burden of care, how can we resent when they're not on board or by our sides? In truth, there is a big difference between complaining and sharing. I've written a chapter on my website called Denial Delusion, which discusses how other people in a family may not want to face the reality that a brother or sister or parent has memory loss or dementia or any of the variations on the theme. And I've written a chapter about it because there are many, many reasons why this happens. And if it's something that's happening in your family, I hope you'll take a look at that chapter. This is what I consider facing dementia square on. Only by being open can we change the status quo. For the past 3 years, I have been writing chapters about caring for my husband. He had been on a 10-year journey of cognitive decline, which was diagnosed as vascular dementia. It has definitely been the 10 most difficult years of my life. So I know what many of you are going through. I've created, with the help of wonderful friends, a website called thedementiadiary.com. And if you would like to come to it, it is free. It is open for anyone and everyone. And you have to use the word the, THE before Dementia Diary, or you will go to somebody else's diary and I will not be responsible. Please, so thedementiadiary.com. And I want to tell you about it because I get letters from complete strangers, people I've never met, who tell me how helpful it's been, which is exactly why I created the website. Very important for me, I guess, to know that the journey that I have just completed with my husband had a greater purpose than just the difficult moments. I'm really hoping that it will help others on their journey to make it a little bit easier to understand what is happening, and sometimes to be able to step back and look at the situation with a little bit of objectivity. We tend to sink under the stress and under the responsibilities, and I actually find humor to write about, and my sense of humor may be a little bit weird, but I think I can make you smile. So if you need a good smile, I would like you to come and read some of the chapters. I had good friends who knew I was writing this and I was planning on publishing it as a book. And they told me that I mustn't wait to publish it as a book, but to make it available for people. And I decided that they were right. And this has become a full-time thing for me. I have written a total of 140 chapters for the dementiadiary.com. I've only published 60 so far. They're not very long. They're 2 to 3 pages. And I'm trying to make it as pleasant an experience as possible. If you come to the website, you will find it's a happy website. It's not a miserable website. I have a section for resources, all the resources that I learned about over the 10 years. I have put the most important ones there. You don't have to wait 10 years to find out which book, which videos, which things you can do for your loved one. I've shared it with you. I hope that you'll look at the resource section and you will take advantage of it. The chapters have very cute names, and each of them is available for you to look at. I realized it wasn't so easy to know what was going to be in a chapter, so I created an index. And the index has topics. So if you are concerned, for example, about depression, yours or your loved ones, or cognition issues, or anger and aggression, and I'll go through a few and give you examples, all of the chapters which talk about those experiences that I had with my husband and things I've learned from them and how to handle them and how to look at them. Everything that's related to that subject will be listed, and I've designed the website so all you have to do is touch the name of the chapter and it will pop up. It's really user-friendly. So for example, under activities and forms of patient support, there's a chapter called The Sinatra Serenade, because my husband fell in love with singing and would sing 3 to 4 hours a day with Frank Sinatra. And the stories, I think the stories are hysterical. It's my husband, it's my life, I think they're hysterical. I hope you'll enjoy them. Also, The News Critic. That's another name of one having to do with every day he would read the newspaper and proclaim what was happening in the world. And it was the most amusing experience, but only if you take the right attitude. If you take the attitude of, that it's terrible if he doesn't actually understand the main point of the article, there's more than one way to look at it. And I'm hoping that you'll let me share that with you. Regarding depression, there's a big section on depression. There's an article I've written called Shall We Medicate Me or Thee? I think that is self-explanatory, but it's a good article and it's got really important information. And I suspect that almost anyone who's giving care to someone else may need to read this chapter. It's very helpful. On understanding the changes in cognition of the patient, I have one chapter which is called Can't versus Won't. And I think it's an important one, which discusses, we tend to say, well, he won't do that or she won't do that. But the question really is, bottom line, is that person able to do what we're saying they won't do, or is it not possible for them? So I look at that in some detail and hope that will help you to deal with it. There's one called The Picture Frame. There's another called Parallel Realities, where my husband and I are watching the same show and having two totally different experiences. And there's a lot of humor in that one, but it helps. I hope it helps for you to see that it's okay to have different experiences as long as you're sharing that moment together. And then I have another one having to do with cognition, which is when words fail, when the wrong words come out, and understanding what that person is trying to communicate is another example. These are examples. I'm not listing all of the chapters by any imagination. There's a section on anger and aggression, because some people, not all people, become angry or aggressive with dementia. One of them is called The Lack of Oxygen. And another one is called The Consequences of Anger. And the one that you may like the most is called The Knife. So that one, I'm going to leave that one for you to go look at. I deal with eating issues, fear, paranoia, hallucination, obsessions, OCD, hiring of care aides, health dangers. Now, the health dangers are something really important. Forgive me. I have one called the dreaded UTI, which is urinary tract infection. I have another one called surviving Heimlich, because I actually saved my husband's life 5 times with the Heimlich maneuver. It's a pretty important chapter. I have a group of articles about hospital dangers. Hospitals are not always the best place for dementia patients. And this is something that each family has to be aware of and needs to consider before they rush to a hospital with someone who has memory issues or can't follow instructions. I have one chapter called A Little Dot Can Kill You, and another chapter, To ER or Not to ER. I think those are really important. They're not whimsical, but they're important. I have chapters about marital changes. One is called The Foolish Woman, and another the detective, and another the lie-in. And with medications, I have one called Pills, 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 and another called The Cocktail. All of these are based on experiences, and each of them tells a vignette, a story, and I hope that they will be helpful. I have two particular chapters where I wrote about the self-care of the caregiver, because caregivers tend to ignore their own needs because they're so busy taking care of their loved ones' needs. One of them has to do with panic attacks, which I had, didn't understand what I was having. So there's a chapter called My Own Guantanamo Bay. And the other one is called, A Lack of Oxygen. That was another one. So I have chapters that have to do with doctors. And my favorite of them is called Beware of Ologists. It's a word I made up. Don't look it up in the dictionary. It's not there. An ologist is, a dermatologist, a gerontologist, a hematologist, a cardiologist, the list goes on and on and on. And why do I say beware of them? Because each of them has this narrow vision, and we are dealing with a complicated person with complicated issues. So I give a lot of examples and stories, and I hope that you'll find it supportive and helpful. There's another one called Dental Drama, going to the dentist and not getting exactly what you anticipated, and another called Trial and Error. These all have to do with medical issues. And then there are chapters about social behavior and problems there. And it goes on and on. Stresses of being a spouse or a caregiver, one of which is called To Be or Not to Be. And another one you'll see really cute pictures, which I spend a lot of time selecting. And there's one of a brain, a multicolored brain, very cute. And it's called A Gourmet Treat. So I hope that will tempt you to take a look. But I hope that each of the chapters will be meaningful for you. Obviously, there's no charge to any of it. I just want to share what I've learned and let you know, number one, that you're not alone, and that this is a journey for many, many millions of people that we are all embarked upon. I have designed the index so that the chapters and the titles look interesting. You can click on them and the chapter will appear immediately if you go to the index. You will also find that it's a very multifaceted website. It's called the dementiadiary.com with the word "the." I even have recipes on it, partly because some of the recipes are ones that my husband actually enjoyed when he wouldn't enjoy anything, but also because I think we deserve to have a more well-rounded life than just complaining and caregiving. There's a lot more that we have to do for ourselves. They're family recipes. I hope you will enjoy them. For those of you who prefer to listen rather than read, I have 10 chapters, which are now podcasts, and you can hear them on YouTube. There are 10 DementiaDiary.com podcasts. You can get to them from my website, which is the DementiaDiary.com. So for those of you who are listening and who are actually in Israel, I know a lot of you are not in Israel, you are invited to come on Tuesdays to Tuesday Coffee with Barbara at the Talpiot branch of Milabev on Derech Beit Lechem. We begin December 6th at 3 o'clock. If you want to come and stamp your feet or cry or bitch or complain or just make friends, I will be there and happy to share and discuss any of your experiences with you. You do have to tell Liat at the Talpiot branch if you'd like to come, so that she will reserve a space for you in advance. Please feel free, if you look at the website, to copy and share anything you want. I'm not worried about any of that. whatever, if you think there are people in your family that don't understand what you're going through, and you think a chapter might help them to understand your experience, please you're welcome to copy it, send it on. It's my pleasure. I hope that the website that I created will make you feel a bit more empowered, will make you know that you are not alone, and that your concerns are very real, and that you deserve tremendous credit. And I'm very happy that we will be taking dementia out of the closet. And I thank you very much for joining me today, and would be delighted if you have questions. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara. We opened the opportunity for you people to switch on your microphones. Okay, so if you want, you can at the bottom left side you see a icon of a microphone. You can ask Barbara questions. Feel free. Okay.
I'm wondering when the book will come out. I would love to have one.
I really want it to be a book. I really do. It might end up being two, because there's a lot. There's a lot of, if I have something already 130 chapters or something already, and I've only published about 50. So it may even be two books, and I'm waiting for a good offer. If you know anybody in the business, let me know. That was the intention originally. I just got sidetracked.
Millions of sufferers. I think it will be a hot seller.
Who is that? Andy.
It's me.
Okay. Hi, Andy. Lovely.
Good to see you.
Delighted. Anybody else want to say anything?
Barbara, we have some questions on the chat, okay? So if you want to open it.
Okay, where's the chat?
Let's see. Is it possible to mention the signs of dementia? This is the first question.
Is it possible to mention the signs of dementia? I actually don't know what that question is asking of me.
Okay, if the person is here, if you can open your microphone.
Could they be a little bit more
context?
Okay, yeah. and Susan, if Susan is still here, she asked, how much or was your husband involved in the efforts to be public about his medical situation?
How much was he involved? He knew I was writing every day, these chapters. I let him read a few of them. He honestly didn't understand what I was trying to accomplish. It's very sweet that the one thing he asked me, I told him I was writing about the experience that we were going through together, and he asked me not to use his name, which I thought was very interesting. You see, the ego stays intact, even with other things, when other things sort of, take a hike. So instead of calling him Bernard, that was his name, I called him hubby. I used a euphemism, and my husband or hubby, or it was fine. I didn't really want to use his name, because I feel that everyone who reads these chapters is going to connect with them, with their loved one. So I didn't really want it just to be a book about my experience with one person, or chapters about one person. I thought that what I learned was so much bigger than us, that I was able to use the word hubby a lot. Used hubby a lot. Yeah. Did I answer the question?
Someone else, somebody want to ask Barbara a question about what she went through and coping with the husband with dementia? Okay, someone's writing down. How common is it that the affected person is totally unaware of his condition?
I don't think they're ever totally unaware. unless they're really so far along that they're bedridden and they can't communicate. But even people who can't communicate, I have stories about this. Even when they can't communicate, they can be thinking. There's a lot of misconceptions. If someone for example, loses the ability to communicate with the right words, it doesn't mean that they don't know what they want to say. It means perhaps that word is gone from their vocabulary. I don't know if I answered the question. I got sidetracked. Ask the question again. Could you?
Yeah. How common is that the affected person is totally unaware of his condition?
I don't think people are totally unaware. First of all, it usually comes on really slowly. And there are issues along the way. But I'll tell you something, because it comes on slowly, I don't think it's necessary for a person who has dementia to be unhappy. I don't think that they necessarily have to be unhappy, even though it's very, very difficult for the caregiver. That's the person who has the most pain, more so than the patient. But I don't think they're totally unaware, but I also don't think they're totally aware of their condition. They learn to live within this new world that they're in. The hardest one is for those of us who care for them. It's much harder for us.
And what about
Because
denial? Did you ever feel that he's denying his condition?
I don't think he ever understood his condition. I'm not sure if denial is the right word. That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
I don't think he denied it. I didn't use the word dementia at all with him. I never put him down. I always tried to support him and put him in situations where he would be comfortable. And when situations became uncomfortable, I changed the situations that I exposed him to. So for example, I stopped taking him to the homes of friends because he was unable to act appropriately some of the time, because I didn't think that was fair to the friends who were making a lovely evening, for example. But I invited those same friends to my home, because in my home, it's okay. In my home, if something inappropriate or uncomfortable happens, it's my husband, and okay, they're my friends. So I felt, I don't know if this is a good example, I hope it is. I felt that bringing people to my house for dinner or for a party was okay. I wasn't ever interested in hiding my husband's condition, but I also didn't think it was fair at a certain point to impose him on other people's parties and other people's events. So it's you have to judge the person individually. As long as they can function well in a social situation, it's fine. But when things start to happen, as they may, that are awkward or embarrassing or uncomfortable, then you have to make some decisions. I never, ever wanted to hide. He loved people. He adored people. I had a lot of parties, a lot of dinner parties. And really only at the very in the last year, did some things happen that were really quite bizarre. But up until then, he managed. He handled himself pretty good. So that's what friends are for.
Right. Thank you. Any more questions to Barbara? Shaul, yes.
I was interested in the course of that last answer. You mentioned that you never used the word dementia with your husband. You mentioned at your start of your lecture that it's quite a loaded term for many people.
Right, right.
And were you concerned that he would be afraid of the condition? What was the reason that you didn't mention the word dementia?
Because in our society, words sometimes just take on such a negative connotation. If you tell someone they have dementia, oh my God, what does that mean? I can't think straight. I can't make a decision. I'm not a person anymore. I would never want to do that to a loved one, ever. especially someone, I was married to him almost 50 years and he was a wonderful husband. So I would have never said to him, you have dementia. You know, I would say, oh, you can't remember. That's okay. That's why you've got me. I mean, I would find ways around it, but it didn't change what he had, and it didn't change the issues I had to deal with. But, you know, words can be really loaded. And I think that dementia is a word that many people are afraid of. And there's so many variations on it, and there's so many different levels of it. And some people function so much better than others, and some people are more sociable than others. And it's not a one shoe fits all, you know. And my husband was very outgoing and he loved people, adored them. So I'm not gonna, I certainly would not want to put him down in any way. And he started going to Milibev 6 years ago. And he was in the highest functioning group when he started, and not at the end. He loved all the things that they offered. He loved the therapy sessions and the psychodrama, and I don't know, he was a ball of fire in the beginning, and they adored him. No, but took its toll.
No, I just was asking specifically on that term dementia, but therefore you used other terms just to describe the condition. You just didn't want to like
when I'm talking to him,
term.
I would, yeah, if I'm talking to him, I don't say you have dementia. I say, you know, your memory's not working that great, or, you know, there's lots of euphemisms for someone not being able to remember something. You know.
You know, because when we started on this road, it was interesting that, you know, my wife was actually asking professionals, is this the onset of dementia? Is this Alzheimer's? Okay. That's what she actually was fearing. And she was actually upset when they wouldn't give her a clear answer one way or the other. And the doctor that she loved the most was the one who said
she asked, and she was an intelligent woman. And my husband never asked. So I was just lucky. You know, the truth of the matter is, even if they ask, they will forget the answer later. But it's also going to upset them when you answer them, because your wife, I don't know where everybody went. Your wife was bright enough to ask intelligent questions, and she would also be bright enough to fear the answers.
Yeah.
I lost the picture.
Just interested is that specific point. The other issue really is in the medical profession. Somebody explained it to me that the younger doctors, especially those that are American trained, are actually very cautious to use anything which might be construed as a diagnosis of a condition, fearing that they might be found out to be wrong, and they've got various insurance and other issues, whereas most of the older doctors didn't use it out of concern for the patient's condition. And of course, the doctor that my wife loved the most was the one who told her that early onset dementia for people who don't have it in the family is so rare that you don't even have to consider it. There's obviously other issues which we'll find for this. And she loved that diagnosis.
Of course she loved it. And, you know, I don't really think it matters. Number one, we want them to be happy. We don't want them to be very upset. And, you know, each person has to fend for the benefit of their loved one and decide what's right for them. There's so many different permutations. There's so many different personalities. There are people that want to know. There are people that don't want to know. You know, each person is so unique, and each person also may have a different condition than the person sitting next to them, you know, in the group. So there's so many permutations on it. It's really quite endless how many variations there are. And, you know, I know that doctors are very reticent to give a prognosis, you know, but that's why we have groups, and that's why we share our experiences and try to help one another too. Doctors, like you say, are worried about liability, responsibility. There's all kinds of shtick, as we call it. But we can be honest with each other. It's okay.
Thank you very much, Lionel. If you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask Barbara, this is all interesting and amazing how you've done this and written about it. Can you tell me, Bernard loved the music, Bernard, the Frank Sinatra that you played at the beginning. How was he with things like Shabbat or Yom Tov? How was he? I mean, if you told him it was Shabbos, for instance, would he appreciate that? Or would
No.
he? No, not at all. It never.
No.
Yeah.
It didn't, he couldn't put it into context. You know, I mean, for 1 minute, you know, you might say, you know, I'm lighting candles, it's Shabbat. He said, that's nice. And then he'd forget about it a minute later, because as the memory and the ability to recall diminishes, so does all the context of Shabbat or other holidays.
Right.
You know, and when, of course, your loved one, I mean, we're just 2 people in the house. So if there's no Shabbat for him, there's no Shabbat for me. So it was a double loss. You know, I had a loss. I had a lot of loss as well, you know.
Of course. And if you played Kol Nidre, the music of Kol Nidre, it wouldn't appeal to him as it would as Frank Sinatra.
He would have loved it probably. Because he loved Cantorial.
Yes, that's
he would have loved it. He would have loved it for sure. Absolutely.
But it didn't register anymore.
You know, he stopped going to shul when he could no longer follow the service.
Right.
And I would see sometimes we would go maybe for the Hagim or something, and all of a sudden he's standing up and he's putting his talis away. Oh, I gotta go find out what's this man doing, you know? And I went outside and I said, what's going on? He says, I'm gonna go home. I can't follow it anymore. So everything happens in little tiny steps.
In tiny steps. Okay.
Yeah. And you know, it's
thanks for sharing it, Barbara.
thank you for listening today.
Oh, come on.
Barbara,
Yeah.
I've sent you a private message. My daughter has just published 2 weeks ago a health book, and she might be able to help you with publishing.
Oh, that would be delightful. Thank you.
I'll send you
I can use all the help I can get.
if you could, you look in the messages. I've given you my daughter's name and number. She'd be delighted to you. And thank you so much.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Can you see the message? Did you see the message?
No. Could you just send me a message to the Barbara at the dementiadiary.com? Would you do that for me?
The Dementia Diary.
The dementiadiary.com. THEDEMENTIA diary.com.
Is that an email?
No, it's an internet site.
It's an email for me at my website, and I get it with my other email.
Okay, so Barbara, before we started this Zoom meeting, you were talking to me about Zoom. It's like a Zoom training for foreign workers. So we have here Leah Abramovich. She's one of the founders.
Oh, good. I know who Leah is. Of course, I do.
I would be very happy if Leah can explain to us a bit about the course so people can understand
yes, that'd be great.
Okay, Leah?
Of course, yeah.
If you can unmute yourself.
Oh. There you go, okay.
We have just started a 3rd course in English, and this time by Zoom, for foreign workers who would like to get some basic education of what it means to take care of an older person, a person with dementia, and also how to deal with the families, because we're talking about a situation which is not only taking care of an older person, but a person who's part of a family, part of a system, and who better than you, Barbara, knows what's involved here. So if there are people who are interested in still signing up their foreign worker, if they themselves would like to join, it's still possible. and one can get in touch with Malaber's office and sign up. Thank you so much.
I was really happy to hear, Leah, that you're doing that. I was just discussing with Yossi that there's a big difference, when these foreign workers come to Israel or elsewhere, they are not trained in dementia. They're trained in the elderly, but taking care of someone who is elderly and has dementia has all different issues and things that need to be discussed. And I've actually had girls come maybe as substitutes for my full-time carer when she was off, and they left here in tears because they'd never dealt with dementia. So, I mean, it's, assigning someone to a dementia patient who has absolutely no experience in dementia can be a real problem. I mean, if the person who has the dementia is at the beginning of their journey, and it's not severe, then perhaps you can just bring in someone who deals with the elderly and they will learn along with the demise of that patient's condition. But when these young people are brought over from wherever, the Philippines or Sri Lanka, with no training at all to do with dementia, I think it's a tremendous disservice. And I was saying to Yossi, I was wondering if there was any way that I would be happy to work with you, Leah, if there's any way you think we could make an inroad to have the government, since the government has rules and regulations about what these people must be trained in before they come to us. Perhaps we could talk to some people and get them to understand that there needs to be a few days of talking about dementia specifically. It's not sufficient just that it's the elderly.
In addition, maybe we can make a few short videos for foreign workers and send it out to many of them, and people who want to join a course like Leah does, like IMDA, the other NGO in Israel, maybe people can join it. It's very important for people to get the information and skills and understand what they are dealing with.
And these foreign workers, they come with English as their primary language. They certainly don't have any Hebrew when they come, which I also don't understand why they don't have a crash course and a few important bits of Hebrew that they could actually talk to people who don't speak English. But that's another issue. But really, Leah, what you have on offer, needs to be offered to certainly everyone at Milabev to invite their Metapellet to join you. They need to all know about it.
Right.
Everybody, every family.
A quick endorsement as well. I sent our caregiver who arrived just at the time that Leah launched the first of these programs. And I regard that as probably the best investment that I made, because we had previously had a caregiver. I mean, this lady is obviously herself a very wonderful person, but having the access to resources and the background gave her a complete new edge. And also, I think she felt that we were investing in her right from the start, and therefore she saw that we were expecting a lot from her, but we were also prepared to give to her to assist her in the task. It was a very worthwhile investment, Leah. Thank you.
It's important. I think it's really valuable, really important, because those young men and women, they spend 24/7 with their loved ones, and the more tools we can give them, the better our lives are and the better our loved one's life is.
Right.
How would we access Leah's? Is it a podcast? Is it what is it, and how would we access it?
No, it's a course on Zoom. They are meeting now. They started yesterday. They are having a 10-week of course once a week on Mondays, 8 meetings on Zoom and 2 meetings in the Talpiot Day Center of Milabev.
Okay, so Andy is asking, how can someone who's not in the area connect with those Zoom events?
So you can send me your details, and I will send it over to Leah, and Leah can call you tomorrow Thursday and give you some more information about it.
Give us,
What-
give us.
what's your email?
Give her your email. Yeah.
Yossi, Yossi, I will write it down here as well. Yossi at Melabev, MELABEV.org.
See, this is another example. This is of how, Leah, this is another wonderful example of how your efforts can balloon. You know, once people know about the classes and when they're offered and how to access them, you could be dealing with hundreds of people instead of the number that have only signed up so far.
Right.
And that would be great. I mean, in Israel alone, I don't know. I know we have 24,000 illegal caregivers. How many do we have that are legal? Anybody know?
No.
No, could be 100,000 altogether. I don't know. We have a lot of people who could benefit if their employers knew that it was available. Any other questions from anybody? Lovely to see some of you that I haven't seen for such a long time. It's so nice.
There is a question in the chat about intimacy, if you feel comfortable
Okay.
talking about that.
I feel comfortable talking about anything, Andy. Absolutely anything. What's the, just ask me the question. I'm not looking at the.
Oh,
at
the chat, the question came from someone. Could you please refer to the issue of increased need / demand for intimacy?
On behalf of the patient or the caregiver?
I don't know. I wasn't the question.
I think that intimacy, depending on the age of the person who has the dementia, it can be a problem. My husband was 95 when he passed away, and that was only a month ago. So, and I'm 20 years his junior. And he, until the day before or a week before he passed, he was, his libido was functioning, you know, like an 18-year-old. You know, I'm here doing all the work and trying to create order out of chaos. And then my husband wants to be romantic. I'm sorry, I wasn't interested. What can I tell you? Discussing stuff. You know, he just didn't understand why I wasn't just all fired up, you know, well, you know, he was 95 and I was 75, whatever, intimacy is a problem, I think, because, you know, you're no longer, there's a point at which it's fine. Up to a certain point, I don't think there's a problem, but at some point it can become, there can be lots of issues with intimacy, lots of them. It's very hard on everybody. It's hard if you aren't intimate. It's hard if you are intimate and you aren't having the kind of experiences that are pleasant or, you know, satisfying for anybody. You know, that's complicated stuff. This is a whole Zoom all by itself. You know?
It would be a good chapter or two, probably also.
I don't think I actually write about that. I think that I didn't write about it out of respect for my husband. I think, you know, at some point you have to have a few limits, you know, and I kind of decided that bathroom issues and sex probably weren't necessary for my book. You know, there are some limits, you know, that we can all draw a line around. But I did talk a lot about the insecurity of someone who has dementia when they know that their spouse is vital and they're terrified that you're going to have a relationship with somebody else and they're going to lose you. That is a very real issue with many couples. My husband was jealous every time I went to the grocery store. And I have a chapter where I say he thought I was having an affair between the parsnips and the cabbage. You know, I don't know when he thought I had time for any of that. And he was very nervous when I went out, and he was very suspicious of everybody. And the chapter that's called The Knife is specifically about his Michigan. Okay, so there's a lot of that. I mean, they are, first of all, dementia patients can be very paranoid. They're very suspicious. They're not trusting. They're frightened because they're really dependent on us. You know, they really need us for everything. And if we walk out the house and have an affair or go off to somebody else, they are terrified what would happen to them. So they are vulnerable in a lot of different ways. It's not just about, it's about all levels of intimacy. And when somebody has serious decline, the relationship changes massively. You know, the person you adored is a different person than the person you're taking care of. Not their fault. So these are very real issues that I think people do need to communicate about, for sure.
And the power relationship changes too. Who's in
Yeah.
control?
So I married a man 20 years older than me, who always knew more than me because he was 20 years older than me. Okay, I mean, by definition, he was right and I was wrong most of the time. He was 45, I was 25, okay? But then, of course, here we are 50 years later. He died 1 week before our 50th anniversary, or 1 month before our 50th anniversary. You know, all of a sudden, I'm in charge of everything. I'm making all the decisions. He has really no vote. Plus, he didn't even care about having a vote. But the whole dynamic changes. Everything about the relationship changes. And if you love someone and they've been a good mate and you've adored them, and they've adored you and they've been good to you, then you are there, you know, the whole time. The people I feel sorry for are people who did not have good marriages and end up in the caregiving role. That is extremely difficult. I give a lot of advice on the different Facebook groups. I don't know how many of you have ever gone to any of them, but there are Facebook groups. First, you have to belong to Facebook, but then there are groups that deal with dementia. And there are at least 10 of them. And they're really I think they're very positive. You can go to a group and you can put there a problem you're having at home. You're fairly anonymous. Nobody in the group knows who you are. And people will give you their opinions or how to deal with it or what their experiences were. So when I say there's a lot of support out there, there is a lot of support out there. These are very real issues, for sure.
Thank you very much for sharing. If somebody wants to ask something, wants to ask Barbara something. Okay, thank you very much all for joining. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Ganit, who works
Thank you all for joining.
together with me at Milabev.
Thank you. Have a good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
And have a good evening. If
Wonderful.
somebody wants the recording of the meeting in about an hour or an hour and a half, it will be on YouTube. Look for Melabev's channel on YouTube, and we have all the recordings there.
Excellent.
Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Good night, everybody.